It started as a normal night, a billionaire checking into the city's grandest hotel. But within minutes, 5 men walked in behind him, and everything changed. Guns drawn, lights flickering, panic everywhere, until one woman, a maid, moved faster than anyone imagined. What happened next, no one in that hotel will ever forget. It was supposed to be a quiet evening at the Grand Horizon Hotel, the kind of place where luxury whispered through every hallway. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like frozen raindrops. Jazz music drifted softly through the lobby, and the air smelled faintly of fresh lilies. Outside, however, the city of Atlanta was drowning in a thunderstorm. Lightning slashed across the sky, thunder rolled deep and heavy, and rain battered the hotel's glass walls like a warning. At exactly 12:07 a.m., the revolving doors spun open. In stepped Ethan Cross, a billionaire tech mogul known across the country for his cutting-edge inventions and ruthless business strategies. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair slicked back, confidence radiating off him like an invisible crown. Behind him, 5 men followed, all in black suits, carrying the same discreet earpieces and cold, professional expressions. To everyone watching, they looked like Ethan's security detail, his loyal protection squad. But Ethan had no idea that the men walking behind him weren't his bodyguards anymore. He strode across the marble floor, phone pressed to his ear, discussing a late-night deal worth millions. The receptionist smiled politely, pretending not to overhear, but her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the penthouse key card. She'd seen something that didn't sit right. But how could she warn him? Who would believe a front desk clerk at this hour? From a corner near the service hallway, Maria Lopez watched the scene unfold. She was a tall, quiet maid in her early 30s wearing the standard hotel uniform. Black slacks, white blouse, hair tied neatly in a bun. Most guests never even looked at her twice. She was invisible, just another worker blending into the hotel's rhythm. But Maria's eyes were sharp, sharper than anyone realized. When the men entered, she noticed the way their eyes moved, not scanning exits or corners like real security professionals. No, they were fixated on Ethan, studying him, waiting. Their movements were too synchronized, too controlled. Something about it sent a chill crawling down her spine. The chandelier above flickered as thunder cracked again. For a brief second, the entire lobby dimmed into darkness. And in that half-second of shadow, one of the men subtly exchanged a nod with another. When the light returned, their faces were calm, unreadable. But Maria had caught it. Her instincts screamed, "Something's wrong." Ethan, unaware of the danger, walked toward the elevator, scrolling through his phone. The men followed closely, too closely. One of them held his hand near his jacket pocket, where a small bulge hinted at something metallic. Maria's heart started to race. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice froze. She reached for her cleaning cart, pretending to adjust a towel, while keeping her eyes on the elevator doors. "Good night, gentlemen," the receptionist said weakly. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Ethan stepped in first. The 5 men entered behind him. As the doors began to close, Maria caught a brief glimpse. The tall man at the back glanced over his shoulder, meeting her eyes for a split second. His expression was cold, almost mocking, as if he knew she had noticed. Then the doors sealed shut with a metallic ding. The digital floor indicator above the elevator began climbing. 10. 20. Penthouse. The lobby fell silent except for the hum of the lights and the soft patter of rain. Maria stood frozen, her hand gripping the cart handle tightly. Something deep inside her, something buried under years of silence, must told her this was no ordinary night. Up above, the elevator came to a stop. The doors slid open to the grand penthouse suite, a wide marble hallway leading to Ethan's private office. He stepped out first, still distracted by his phone. The 5 men followed quietly behind him. The sound of the elevator door closing echoed through the hall like a countdown ending. Ethan turned, suddenly aware of the silence. "You guys coming, or?" He never finished that sentence. The man directly behind him reached into his jacket and pulled out a silenced pistol. The metallic click echoed faintly, cold, deadly, final. Ethan froze, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Slowly he raised his hands. "Wait, what is this?" He stammered, his voice trembling. No one answered. Down in the lobby, Maria felt the tremor in her gut. She didn't need to hear the shot to know what had just happened. She glanced toward the elevator. The digital display no longer moved. The storm outside roared louder, thunder shaking the glass. The elegant hotel had turned into a trap. And the man who had everything was now at the mercy of 5 strangers. Maria Lopez had worked at the Grand Horizon Hotel for 5 long years. Every day looked the same. Crisp uniforms, neatly folded towels, and the quiet hum of vacuum cleaners echoing through endless corridors. Guests walked past her without a second glance, barely noticing the woman who made their rooms spotless. To most people, Maria was invisible, just another maid pushing a cleaning cart. But that night, her instincts whispered something she hadn't felt in years, something dangerous. It started earlier that evening when she was restocking supplies near the loading dock behind the hotel. Through the drizzle of rain, she saw 2 men in suits step out of a black SUV. They looked like bodyguards, tall, broad, calm. But as they stood under the flickering light, she noticed something strange. One man pulled out a fake security badge, carefully swapping it with another, then adjusted his earpiece. That wasn't normal. Real security didn't switch identities. Maria froze, her sharp eyes narrowing. Without drawing attention, she pretended to wipe a counter, then discreetly lifted her old cracked phone and snapped a quick photo. Her heart thudded once, a dull echo of her old instincts. She told herself it was nothing, maybe a misunderstanding. But as she watched them enter the elevator that led to the main lobby, her gut clenched. Something's wrong, she thought. Later that night, when she saw those same men following Ethan Cross through the lobby, every nerve in her body went on alert. She recognized their posture, the way they scanned the area, the subtle formation they kept. That wasn't hotel security behavior. That was a tactical escort pattern, one used to trap, not protect. So, she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She followed. Maria pushed her cleaning cart into the service elevator, riding it up to the penthouse floor. The hotel corridors grew quieter the higher she went. By the time she reached the top, all she could hear was the faint hum of air conditioning and the crackle of thunder outside. The lights flickered again, casting ghostly reflections on the polished marble floors. She approached the grand penthouse door, room 4401. Her gloved hand reached for the handle, but before she could knock, a sound froze her in place. A muffled shout, then a dull thud. Her hand tightened around the mop handle. The gentle, kind maid was gone, replaced by a soldier listening for danger, calculating her next move. She crouched slightly, pressing her ear to the door. Inside, she heard Ethan's voice, and shaky, desperate. "Please, I don't have the codes here. They're locked in an encrypted file." Then came a harsh reply, a man's voice, cold and threatening. "You think we're playing games? You made enemies cross, now you'll pay." Maria's chest tightened. She peeked through the tiny gap between the door and frame, catching a glimpse of the scene. Ethan Cross tied to a chair, blood trickling down his lip. 5 men circled him like wolves, one holding a gun, another flipping through his laptop. They were searching for financial data, offshore accounts, government contracts. This wasn't a robbery. It was organized extortion. Her pulse raced. She could walk away, call security, pretend she saw nothing. That's what she'd done for years. Stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. But this time, she couldn't, because she wasn't just a maid. Years ago, back in the Dominican Republic, Maria had been part of a special forces unit, elite soldiers trained in tactical combat, infiltration, and intelligence. She was one of the best, quick, precise, fearless. But everything changed the night her husband, also a soldier, died on a mission gone wrong. The loss broke her. She left that world behind, crossed the ocean, and built a quiet life, one where no one asked about her past. She found peace in cleaning rooms and fixing beds, small, simple acts that didn't require courage or killing. But tonight, that peace shattered, her breath steadied, her body tightening like a drawn bowstring. She assessed the room's layout in her mind. One main door, one side exit through maintenance, a service panel she could use to get inside quietly. Her training kicked in automatically. She remembered the feel of her weapon, though now all she had was a mop, a broom, and a spray bottle. Still, she smiled faintly. A soldier always finds a way. She glanced once more through the door crack. The leader of the group lifted Ethan's chin with the barrel of his gun and hissed, You think you can play hero with the government's money? Maria's eyes hardened. They had no idea who was standing just outside, listening, calculating, remembering every tactical move, every breath, every exit. The maid they ignored was about to become their biggest problem. Because while Maria came to America seeking peace, tonight war had come knocking, and this time she was ready to answer. Maria's breathing slowed as her instincts took over. She pushed her cleaning cart quietly against the wall, her fingers wrapping around the worn handle of her spray bottle. To anyone else, it looked ordinary, filled with lemon-scented cleaner. But Maria had learned long ago that safety meant preparation. After a few too many drunk guests and late-night creeps, she had modified that bottle with a mix of industrial-strength cleaning acid and pepper spray. Now, it was her only weapon. She looked both ways down the hallway, empty. The sound of thunder outside covered her footsteps as she slipped through the narrow maintenance door. Inside, a hidden service passage ran between the penthouse suites, a space used by staff for discreet cleaning. The air was warm, metallic and silent except for the faint buzz of the overhead wiring. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her movements stayed steady. Left foot, breathe, check corners. Listen. Each sound from the next room grew clearer, muffled voices, harsh tones, and the metallic scrape of a gun against a table. Inside the penthouse, Ethan Cross was still tied to the chair. His wrists were bleeding from the rope. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Across from him stood the leader, a tall man with a scar slicing across his cheek and cold, predatory eyes. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, voice trembling. "I can pay you, legally." "Whatever you want." The leader chuckled darkly. "We don't need your advice, old man. Just the codes." He nodded to one of his men. "Plug in the laptop. We'll make him talk." Maria crouched behind the wall, her pulse steadying. She slipped her hand into her belt, pulling out a small screwdriver she'd kept for maintenance work. With one quick twist, she pried open the vent panel between the two rooms, just enough to see inside. 5 men, 4 armed, 1 at the door. They were focused entirely on Ethan. That was their mistake. A spark of lightning flashed outside, followed by a boom of thunder that shook the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then complete darkness. For a moment, the world went black. In that darkness, Maria moved. The men cursed, fumbling for their flashlights. A chair scraped, a gun cocked, then crash. A body hit the floor, a scream cut through the dark, sharp and sudden. "My eyes, I can't see." When the emergency lights flickered back on, one man was down, clutching his burning eyes, gasping in pain. His weapon lay on the carpet. The others spun around wildly, guns raised, but there was no one in sight. Maria had already slipped behind the heavy curtains. Her body blended with the shadows. She grabbed the fallen man's gun, pulled the magazine out, and tossed it under a couch, useless to anyone now. Another man crept toward the door. "She's in here somewhere," he hissed, a sound behind him, a faint metallic clink. He turned, too late. Maria swung her mop handle like a staff, cracking it against his knee. He collapsed with a yell, and before he could shout again, she whipped her cleaning belt around his neck and pulled, tight enough to knock him out cold. Ethan watched in stunned silence, barely able to comprehend what was happening. This quiet maid, the woman who'd brought him coffee just hours ago, was fighting like a trained operative. Every movement she made was fluid, controlled, deadly. The remaining 3 men regrouped. "Spread out," the leader barked. "She's just one woman." Maria smirked to herself. That's what they all say. She grabbed a glass vase from a side table and tossed it across the room. It shattered loudly, a perfect distraction. As 2 of the men turned, she darted low and fast, kicking one's leg out from under him and spraying the other directly in the face with her modified cleaner. He screamed, stumbling back as the chemical burned his eyes. Now only the leader remained, tall, scar-faced, furious. He looked around at his unconscious team, his breathing harsh. "You've got guts, lady," he growled. "But you just signed your death sentence." Maria stepped from the shadows, her face calm, her mop handle in one hand like a baton. "I cleaned up worse than you," she said softly. The leader snarled and charged. Maria sidestepped, grabbed his wrist mid-swing, and twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. He swung again with his other hand, but she blocked it with her forearm and struck his chest with a sharp elbow. He stumbled back and, surprised by her strength, But this time he recovered faster. He lunged, tackling her to the ground. They rolled across the marble floor, fighting for control. The gun slid out of reach, then crack! Maria slammed her knee into his ribs, flipping him off balance. She rolled over him, grabbed his wrist, and pinned it behind his back. He struggled, until she pressed the nozzle of her spray against his face. "Move," she whispered, "and I'll make sure you never see again." He froze. She tightened the belt around his arms, tying him up in one swift motion. As thunder roared outside, Maria stood, chest heaving, surrounded by unconscious men and shattered glass. The once quiet maid now looked like a warrior reborn, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible anymore. The penthouse was chaos. Broken glass on the floor, furniture overturned, the sound of distant sirens echoing from below. The rain outside beat against the windows, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the destruction that had just taken place. Maria stood in the center of it all, chest rising and falling, her uniform soaked with sweat and dust. 4 of the intruders were down, tied, unconscious, or moaning on the floor. But one man still stood, the last one. He was tall, built like a wall of muscle, with a scar running across his cheek like a jagged lightning bolt. His cold gray eyes were locked on her, full of fury and disbelief that a maid had brought his whole team down. And in that moment of silence, he made his move. Before Maria could react, he lunged toward Ethan Cross, who was still tied to the chair. The billionaire flinched, his eyes wide with terror, as the man grabbed him by the neck and yanked him upright. The muzzle of a black pistol pressed against Ethan's temple. "Come any closer," the man snarled, "and he dies." Maria froze, her body instantly reading the distance, the angle, the weight of the gun. One wrong move, one sudden twitch, and the shot would tear through Ethan's skull. Water dripped from her hair as she raised her hands slowly. Her voice was calm but firm. "You don't want to do this," she said softly. "I've seen that look before, a man already running from his own fate." The leader's eyes flicked with rage. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, pressing the gun harder against Ethan's head. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a cleaning lady." Maria took a step forward. "Maybe," she said. "But even a cleaning lady knows how to take out the trash." His grip tightened. Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. The gun trembled slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. The man was seconds away from pulling the trigger. Maria's eyes flicked toward the red box on the wall behind him. The fire alarm. Last warning. He shouted, "Step back!" Maria exhaled. "Fine," she said quietly. Then she kicked the alarm. A shrill "Blar!" exploded through the room as red lights flashed across the ceiling. A half-second later, the sprinkler system burst to life, blasting cold water in every direction. The sudden downpour turned the penthouse into chaos. The gunman flinched, blinded by the spray. Ethan ducked, coughing as water poured over his face. And Maria moved. She darted forward, fast as lightning. The gun fired, a deafening crack that echoed through the suite, but the bullet missed, splintering a lamp instead. Before he could fire again, Maria was on him. She struck his wrist with the edge of her hand once, twice, and forcing the gun loose. It clattered to the floor. She caught his arm, twisted it behind his back, and used his own weight to slam him against the marble counter. The sound echoed, a sickening thud that silenced the room. The man gasped, water dripping from his face. You're no maid," he croaked. Maria leaned in, tightening her grip until he stopped resisting. "You're right," she whispered. "But tonight I'm the one cleaning up your mess." With one swift motion, she drove her knee into his back, knocking him out cold. His body slumped to the floor, the gun sliding out of reach. For a moment, all that could be heard was the sound of water raining down from the ceiling, soaking everything, cleansing the chaos. Maria stood there, breathing hard, her eyes scanning the room. Every threat neutralized, every life saved. Then she turned to Ethan. He was still tied to the chair, drenched, blinking through the falling water. His expensive suit was ruined, his face pale, but his eyes were filled with something new. "Aw. You just saved my life," he stammered. Maria smiled faintly, brushing wet hair from her face. "Just doing my job, sir," she said, untying his ropes. Ethan rubbed his wrists, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" Maria just shook her head. "Someone who's been hiding for too long." At that moment, the suite door burst open. The real hotel security team stormed in. Flashlights cutting through the haze, radios crackling. They stopped dead when they saw the scene. 5 unconscious men sprawled across the floor, broken furniture everywhere, and one soaked maid standing tall beside a billionaire. The chief of security blinked. What the hell happened here? Maria simply stepped aside, guiding Ethan toward them. Just a little housekeeping, she said quietly. The security guards rushed to restrain the attackers. 2 helped Ethan to his feet, wrapping a towel around his shoulders. As he turned to look back, he saw Maria still standing in the rain of sprinklers, calm, steady, her silhouette outlined by flashing red lights. She wasn't a hero looking for glory. She was just someone who refused to stand by and watch the innocent suffer. And in that moment, Ethan Cross knew one thing for sure. He might have built empires, but the real power that night belonged to the maid who saved him. The next morning, the world woke up to headlines that no one saw coming. Billionaire saved by maid with secret military past. Photos of Maria Lopez flooded every social platform, her soaked uniform, her calm expression, and the way she stood beside billionaire Ethan Cross, steady and unshaken. Overnight, the quiet maid everyone ignored had become a national hero. Inside the Grand Horizon Hotel, reporters filled the lobby, their cameras flashing like lightning. The same chandelier that flickered the night before now shimmered bright, reflecting off the polished marble floor. The chaos of last night was gone, replaced by awe and respect. Ethan Cross stepped onto the stage, his arm still bandaged, but his voice steady. The room fell silent as he began to speak. Last night, he said, I realized something I should have known long ago. Heroes don't always wear suits. They don't walk red carpets or sit in boardrooms. Sometimes they wear aprons, sometimes they carry mops, and sometimes they risk everything when no one's watching. He turned to Maria, who stood quietly beside the podium, still wearing her hotel uniform. No makeup, no jewelry, just grace. The room erupted in applause, but Maria's eyes stayed humble, her hands folded. Ethan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside was a lifetime employment contract and a check for $1 million. Maria, he said, his voice softening, this is the least I can do. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me what real courage looks like. But Maria shook her head slowly, tears glimmering in her eyes. I didn't do it for money, sir, she said. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I just want one promise, and that every worker here, every cleaner, cook, and guard, gets treated with the same respect as anyone else. The room went silent again. Then Ethan smiled, a genuine, grateful smile. Then Maria Lopez, he said, you just became the new head of hotel security. The applause this time was thunderous. The staff cheered, journalists shouted questions, and even the guests stood to honor her. But Maria didn't bask in the fame. She just bowed her head slightly, as if saying a silent thank you. Later that afternoon, as the sun broke through the heavy storm clouds, Maria walked out of the hotel in peace. She paused on the steps, feeling the warm sunlight on her face for the first time in what felt like years. In her heart, she whispered a quiet prayer. For you, Carlos, she murmured, and her late husband's name. You'd be proud. For the first time in years, Maria wasn't running from her past. She had found peace, not by escaping who she was, but by accepting it. Her strength, her courage, her training, they were all gifts meant to protect others. From that day forward, the Grand Horizon Hotel became more than just a luxury landmark. Guests whispered stories about a mysterious maid who once took down 5 armed men alone. Some said she vanished after that night. Others said she still worked there quietly, watching over everyone. But the truth was simple. Maria Lopez never stopped being a protector. She just changed uniforms. And though few knew her full story, every person who checked into the Grand Horizon Hotel felt safer than ever. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who can save the world when it matters most.